This lesson is to accompany Notes 6.8a and Homework 6.8a. First, vocabulary. Adjacent angles are when we have two angles that share a side. Notice in this picture that angle 1 and angle 2 share the side, so therefore they are adjacent angles. If we were to separate the two angles, then they are no longer adjacent. Another thing about angles is how we name them. I can name the angles based on the little numbers that are inside of the angles. So I could say angle 1 or angle 2. That's probably the easiest way to name these angles. But I could also use letters. For example, I could say angle D, because D is the vertex of the angle. However, you may notice this is ambiguous because there are two different angles, angle 1 and angle 2, that both have a vertex at point D. So we don't want to use only point D because we're not sure which angle we're talking about. So instead, we would use three letters. So angle 1 could also be called angle ADB, because it starts from point A, goes down to point D, and then up to point B. Notice that the vertex is always the middle letter. So I could also name this angle BDA. Complementary angles are two angles that sum to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are two angles that sum to 180 degrees. Please note that the angles do not have to be adjacent to be complementary or supplementary. For example, I could take the complementary angles and I could draw them like this. Those two angles still add up to 90 degrees, even though they don't share a side anymore. Another word about lines. This line has a total of 180 degrees. We say that a line is a straight angle. All lines contain 180 degrees. There are a couple of types of angle pairs involving two intersecting lines. The first is called vertical angles. Vertical angles are angles that are across from each other from the same vertex. For example, angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles because they are directly across from each other from the same vertex. Please don't be confused by thinking that vertical angles must go up and down. The word vertical normally means up and down, but when we're talking about vertical angles, they can also be horizontal. A linear pair is a pair of angles that lie along a line and are adjacent. For example, these two angles, angle 1 and angle 2, form a linear pair. So a linear pair would be angle 1 and angle 2. Because they are supplementary, they lie along a line, and they share a side. Here are some examples from your assignment. The answers to the odd problems are given at the end of the assignment. So you have to look at the diagram and determine what type of angle pair it is. These two angles are supplementary. They form a linear pair. That means I will add together the two angles and set them equal to 180. Then I solve this equation using the methods that you've already learned. First, I will combine like terms. 62 and 6 are both constants. Add them together, you get 68. I would like to keep the variable term on the left side, so I will subtract 68 from both sides of the equation. I am left with 8x equals 180 minus 68 is 112. And then we divide both sides of this equation by 8. 8 over 8 equals 1. So I get an answer of x equals, now 112 divided by 8 is the same as taking half 3 times. So half of 112 is 56, half of 56 is 28, and half of 28 is 14. So in this case, x equals 14. You can check your work by substituting 14 back in for x and see if the equation is true. Next, move on to number 8. Number 8 features two angles that are vertical because they are across from each other from the same vertex. That means we set the two angles equal to each other. So we will write 80 equals 3x minus 40. I would like to get my variable term isolated. I will do that by adding 40 to both sides of the equation. Those cancel out. I'm left with 120 equals 3x. Divide by 3 on both sides of the equation, and I get x equals 120 divided by 3, which is 40. Finally, number 12. The two marked angles on this diagram are complementary. I can tell because of this square on the diagram. That square indicates that the angle is a right angle. That means I will add together 2x plus 1 and x plus 5 and set them equal to 90. Combining terms, 2x and 1x gives me 3x. A positive 1 and a positive 5 gives me positive 6. I want my variable term to stay where it is, so I subtract 6 from both sides of the equation. This leaves me with 3x equals 84. Now I know that 84 is divisible by 3 because if I add together 8 plus 4, I get 12, which is also divisible by 3. So divide both sides by 3. The 3's I can cross out because 3 over 3 is 1. And I am left with x equals 28. Now, please note that some assignments, or perhaps on a test in the future, you may see a problem just like this. But they might ask you for the measures of each of the two angles. So if you needed to find the measure of one of the angles, for example, let's say we want to know the measure of this angle, then all we would have to do is take the value for x that we just found, substitute it for x in 2x minus 1. So that would give me 2x plus 1, which would become 2 times 28 plus 1. 2 times 28 is 56. Add 1, 57 degrees. Please email me at ctodd@amphi.com or drop me a message on my Google Classroom if you have any questions. Thank you.